Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine and a week of Sauvignon Blanc. I was at a wine event a few weeks ago and I got accosted by somebody who wasn't angry, but they did want to take issue with me on something. They said, "Dan, why do you hate Sauvignon Blanc?" And I protested. I said, I certainly don't hate Sauvignon Blanc. I love Sauvignon Blanc. But what I've done over the last year or so is promote a lot of other white varietals, and that has possibly been at the expense of Sauvignon Blanc. And my belief is not that we don't make nice Sauvignon Blanc, not that we shouldn't drink Sauvignon Blanc, simply that we've got so much nice other white that we should give some of it a chance, be a little more balanced, a little more equal in our white drinking habits. But I also saw a tweet probably a week or two ago where somebody was thanking the wine writer Jamie Good for still supporting Sauvignon Blanc. And that also leads to something of a trend where perhaps we've occasionally gone a little too far in the forget Sauvignon Blanc and drink some of the other newer, cooler, slightly different varietals, and Sauvignon Blanc being left behind as a bit of old school. And I don't think that's the case. I think our Sauvignon Blanc is superb, but maybe it does need a little bit of championing, so that's what I will do this week. And inspired also by the fact that a rather interesting delivery arrived. Wine from the garden route, wine of origin Otaniqua, and it's a garden route Sauvignon Blanc to kick off this week. So this wine is made just outside of George, which is not celebrated as one of the world's better known winemaking areas. But as the Cape gets drier, as water becomes more of an issue, there is a school of thought that maybe we'll start seeing more wine in places like the Garden Route as we head up past Elgin, past Hermanus, up into a stretch of the world where at the moment we don't see massive amount of wine, but that could be changing, and this will be an indication. I received a couple of bottles of the Garden Route wine. There's a Pinot Noir as well, which I'm yet to try. And these are made by a guy called Butznell, who made, if I'm not mistaken, the De Grans Cape Vintage, the port style wine. So slightly different, coming from a big, thick, heavy dessert style red into something that will be a lot paler and a lot lighter and a lot more gentle. But 4 stars from Platter is always an indication that somebody has liked it. And the rumours I've heard so far is that it is actually quite pleasant. So this is, I think, I stand under correction, but I think the first time we've ever had some wine of origin Otaniqua on Dan Really Likes Wine. Now, the Garden Route already has plenty to recommend it. It's one of South Africa's, one of Africa's preeminent tourist destinations, some of the finest golf courses in the world, some of the finest resorts, places like Fancourt, like Pazula, like Samola, wonderful places to go and stay and spend time. But up until now, the wine that you've drunk, while fantastic, has usually come from a little further along the coast, heading back down towards the more conventional winelands. This could be a really cool addition to the greater tourist package. Not only are you staying here, eating here, playing golf here, but you're also drinking wine that's made just down the road. One of the challenges of talking about Sauvignon Blanc is avoiding the cliche, avoiding the stereotype. It's a wonderful summer's drink, great by a picnic, side of the pool, down on the beach, easy going, not too offensive. This one makes it all the more difficult because it ticks all of those aforementioned boxes. It's a very pleasant wine, it's delightful, a little sharpish, could maybe soften out ever so slightly, but it's going to, I think, work very nicely, particularly on the golf course. You see a lot of Sauvignon Blanc at a place like Fancourt as you come off the course and you've had a long and possibly not overly successful day looking for lost golf balls. This could take the sting out of it. So I can picture myself sitting on that deck at Fancourt, just shot 73 at Montague, missing my eagle putt on that par 5 18th. Avoid the block of ice, make sure the wine is cold, keep your ice out of your wine, swing this down, and it'll be a perfectly pleasant end to a lovely day in a gorgeous part of the Garden Route. Well, from the Garden Route to another part of the wine world I absolutely love, the Robertson Valley, and for me one of the foremost wine destinations in South Africa, but not a wine I was initially going to drink. I went out earlier this year when I was on the Cape Epic to see the guys at Courage. I love buying their bubbles, and there are a number of other wines I really enjoy from their range. But this I wasn't convinced by. I met 2 lovely ladies, Lisette Schoon from the local tourism office and Jeanette Bosman, who's a wine savant from the area, tour guide, and gives you the best possible tour around the area. And they said, you have to try this Sauvignon Blanc. Now, I'm usually a little reluctant when I see something like that, gooseberry bush, because to me, when you're shouting out what it tastes like, it sounds like the wine's been a little bit engineered, like it's not as natural as it should be. And we're seeing quite a lot of it at the moment in the marketplace. Wines that are being sold on attributes rather than the wine itself. It's full of raspberries and it's full of blueberries. And I'm not sure I entirely agree with all of that. If it's selling more wine, I suppose it's doing its job. But a gooseberry Sauvignon Blanc didn't really get me going. But I have to apologise to both Lisette and Jeanette, who gave me a wonderful, wonderful day out at Bon Courage, because this was one of the finds of the trip. And when I next head back to Robertson, I'll be going to Bon Courage as usual, but the Bubbles, the Cup Classique, will have some serious competition for the wine that I want to try first. So I think there are only 3 families in the entire Robertson Valley. It's a very difficult phone book to navigate. There are De Vets absolutely everywhere, and there are plenty of Preez as well. And it's the Preez who are behind the Bon Courage label. I love the estate, I love the farm. And what I really like about this wine is, for me, it's great cooking wine. Now, there's a distinguishing factor for me between cooking wine and wine you cook with. Because for me, cooking wine is wine you drink while you cook, which is far more important than the wine you actually put into the food, because it brings out your creativity and guides you through your cookery session. And this is lovely to open in the heat of a kitchen. A couple of glasses of this, I find, make for brilliant, brilliant company. The gooseberries, as they scream out very loudly, are certainly there, but it's more than just that. That's the hint, that's the guiding light, rather than the complete taste that you get. The palate is far broader than that. Not dissimilarly to the previous Sauvignon Blanc, there is that little bit of added acidity, added sharpness, but again, at a slightly lower end Sauvignon Blanc, as both of these are, it's to be expected, and like its predecessor, it's another very pleasant companion. So I've got my golf course wine for Fancourt. I've now got some wine to sit with me in the kitchen, courtesy of the Preez family at Bon Courage in Robertson. Then on to the Preez estate. Now, probably a year ago, maybe more, I talked about the Polles Red, which is one of the first wines I discovered in South Africa. I was on a wine tour just after I'd arrived in the country to go to university, and I discovered this wonderful red wine that cost next to nothing, and the Preez private cellar has been a favourite ever since. I've probably only been 3 or 4 times ever, but it's always been a delight, and the memories have always been good. And on a trip a little earlier this year, as well as picking up a couple of cases of the Polles Red, which still remains ridiculously cheap and enormously drinkable, I also got a couple of others, including this, their Sauvignon Blanc. 2017, like the others, foot of the Du Toitskloof Mountains, and the third of this week's Sauvignon Blancs. So that's very different to the 2 preceding Sauvignon Blancs. It's got a slightly heavier feel, a little more depth to it. Again, very pleasant, very, very strong on its citrus notes, that sort of lemony type feel to it. I do love the back of the label. Now, this is Robertson. Robertson's about as far from the sea as you can get in South Africa. And the suggestion here is that you would drink this with pan-seared scallops. I'm not sure they have a lot of pan-seared scallops in Robertson, but that's the suggestion. I prefer the suggestion of a leafy green salad, because I think this again plays off those archetypal summer themes that Sauvignon Blanc always does seem to invite. But again, this is probably 30, 40 rand, if that. So it's not a massively expensive bottle of wine, and it is a wine that delivers on everything you'd want from a Sauvignon Blanc. It's not going to cost an absolute fortune, and you're going to drink it very pleasantly. The only danger, as is so often the case with Sauvignon Blanc, is that before you know it, 3 or 4 bottles are gone between a few of you, and the next day is just a little slower than it could have been. And then to the coolest new place I've been in 2018, and I do a fair amount of travel, so That is no small accolade to give out, but I give it out really, really happily. I was driving down to Feltefreda, another one of my Robertson favourites, and along the way, in the middle of a vineyard, there was this building sticking out with a beautiful terrace looking out across the vines up to the mountains that I'd never seen before. It looked out of place and yet wonderfully appropriate, if that makes any sense. You noticed it immediately, and I thought, that's got to be a great place to visit. I had no idea what it was. Thought it might have been a B&B or a rather high-tech farming shed of some sort. But on the way back from Feltefreda, I stopped off, and I only had about half an hour or so, and I met a delightful young man who was I'd go as far as saying sommelier. His knowledge was superb. They do a cheese platter here at Esona, and he introduced me to a small but delightful selection of wine. You sit up on their deck, you look out across a splendid view. It really is terrific. They give you an option of cheese with the different wines. They'll take you through a couple of vintages, and they explain their story. It's a very small estate that is owned by a couple in Cape Town. They stay there. And the people on the farm are in and out, looking after their wine and producing a couple of great wines. Tasted a smashing Shiraz. It was a really, really nice addition to the local area. And if you've had the Place of Rocks just down the road at Feltefreda, you'll know it's a terrific part of the world for making Shiraz. But this Sauvignon Blanc I found was really, really good. It certainly was then. A few months down the road, I'm looking forward to more of the same. So if the first three Sauvignon Blancs fit into that, keep a bottle around the kitchen, have them whenever you feel like one, this has got a little more substance to it. It's got a richer nose, a richer palate. It's a slightly denser wine. The tasting note's not massively different to the others. It's a Sauvignon Blanc after all, but there is just something slightly creamier, slightly more luxurious about this. It's a more expensive wine. You're heading north of 100 Rand for it, but it drinks delightfully. It's your New World style Sauvignon Blanc. I think it's absolutely fabulous drunk at Esona, where you're looking over the Preez River and enjoying the hospitality of a wonderful team and a small but delightful architectural gem in the middle of a vineyard. But even sitting here in my cellar in the heart of Johannesburg, it's drinking very pleasantly indeed. And I might go and look for some of those Robertson seared scallops, because I think they could play off this really well indeed. But all of the four wines today, whether it's the slightly more entry-level stuff or this that is a little bit more higher up in terms of your price point, they're all just more reminders of the quality of Sauvignon Blanc we have in South Africa. And again, it's not that I don't like Sauvignon Blanc. Here are 4 good reasons why I really do love it. I just don't think we don't always give as much time to things like Chenin Blanc, Semillon, Viognier, some of the other whites that we make really, really well in South Africa. So do go out and try those, but don't forget your Sauvignon Blancs. And with summer on the relatively near horizon, a couple around the swimming pool and one for your seared scallops, I think you've got a really nice selection here. Cheers.